It's a really important point. If you think you can solve really tricky global problems in 140 characters, right, then you are part of the problem, not part of the solution, right? Let's just stop and draw a line right there. These things are complicated.
All right, Paul, the next thing I want to discuss is a man who seems to be always in the news. It's Elon Musk, and he got into the Ukraine-Russia discussion. It's been about a week now, but essentially what he said is he proposed this Ukraine-Russia peace deal, and part of what he said is this is what needs to happen. Redo elections of annexed regions under UN supervision. Russia leaves if that is the will of the people. Crimea, formerly part of Russia, it has been since 1783, and he added until Khrushchev's mistake, and I want to talk about that. Water supply to Crimea assured, and Ukraine remains neutral. And he was essentially taken to town, including by Vladimir Zelensky, for this proposal. So tell us why, first of all, this might be absurd, everything he's proposing.
It's absurd. Well, it's absurd in part because it's based on ignorance of what's actually going on, and I can detail exactly the ignorance I'm talking about. It's absurd in that basically it's saying give Putin everything he's asked for, which is always one way to avoid war, right? And I always point this out. If back in 1991 the Ukrainians had said, no, we don't really need to be free. If you guys don't want us to go, we'll just stay part of Russia. None of this ever would have happened. So that, there's always this question as to when do you avoid conflict by staying in an abusive relationship, and when do you say, man, it's time to get out? And you think of what will happen to people who live in those territories if Elon Musk gets his way. Right?
But I would say I want to make one distinction here. It's not about Elon Musk getting this way, because he later said this is highly likely to be the outcome in the end. Right. Anyway, this is just a question of how many die before then. Right. Putin is going to say, like, this is what's going to happen no matter what, whether it takes tactical nukes or not. This is what's going to happen.
So there is this argument out there. If we want to treat it that way, there's this argument out there that says if you knew how a war was going to end before it started, you would just go to that point and skip all the death and destruction. And okay, so let's give Musk some credit. I'm skeptical that's really what he's saying is let's just cut to the chase and skip all the death and destruction. Well, everything we know about this war so far is that what we thought about how this war was going to turn out has been wrong every single time. We thought Kiev was going to fall in 3 days, right? We thought the war was going to stalemate. Right? We surely didn't think that the Russians could take out this bridge in Kerch and so on. So he's giving away stuff that doesn't necessarily need to be given away. In that same vein of rational choice literature on conflict that says, you could just get to the end and skip the destruction, basically says the reason that wars have to be fought is because it's not clear who actually would get what at the end. And so basically what war does is it reveals information about strength. And this is where Musk is totally contradicting this whole approach, which is what the war is revealing, right, is that Ukraine, in fact, doesn't have to give up all that Putin wants, let alone NATO have to making the kind of commitments that Putin and Musk are asking for.
But at the same time, there are certain measures that Russia has not resorted to, which could be called desperate measures, nuclear weapons, that he could essentially utilize still to get these things done, essentially, right? So it's almost like, so the argument here is like, so Putin still has the capability to enact all of these things upon Ukraine if he so wishes to go down that route. Now, there'll be terrible international consequences of that. Also, the threat of global nuclear war. And there has to be a resolution at some point. At some point, we have to have a negotiation happening, right? Is there anything that Zelensky could put forward at some point that's gonna have Putin, reassured or feel good about?
Well, I think what's still very much at stake, right? One way to think about this war, and the questions about neutrality are we don't have to set those aside, but if you want to think it's most simply, it's where's the border going to be between Russia and Ukraine, right? That still very much is to be determined on the battlefield, I would say. It is the case that that there are resources to bear, resources that Russia has yet to bring to bear. It's equally the case that Russia's resources are not infinite, and that there are resources that the West could make available to Ukraine that they have not made available yet. Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of questions about how much the resolve of the West will endure through the next winter and so on. There's questions about how long the Russians' will to fight this war will endure through this moment. Right? We've talked about the idea that the Russian army might collapse, mm-hmm. right, or that Putin might get ousted. So until those uncertainties are resolved, we don't know that the place things are going to end up is where Elon Musk, who has demonstrated by other things that he said that he knows nothing about Ukraine and Russia, right? Or let me just, it's worse than knowing nothing. It's that he knows stuff that's not actually true. Okay, and
Can you give an example? Yeah. I'd love an example.
But the point is that that's the somebody who's like magically going to tell us how the war is going to turn out. It's like, come on, folks. Okay, mm-hmm. So he posted this map, and it was a map of, I believe it was the 2012 presidential election, and it basically showed it was labeled pro-Ukrainian parties and pro-Russian parties, and the point of this map was to show that a big swath of Ukraine, including a lot of territory that Russia has occupied and a lot of territory that it hasn't occupied, had voted for these pro-Russian parties, mm-hmm. right? So it seems to show that lots of Ukraine is pro-Russian, right? So there's a lot of trickeration going on here, right? Mm-hmm. What do we mean by pro-Russian? Mm-hmm. Were these parties pro-Russian? Well, I've actually done research on this, and I've read the party programs, and I've watched what the politicians had done. These parties were pro-Russian in the sense that they wanted to have good relations with Russia, mm-hmm. right? Trade ties, basically. They were clearly not parties that wanted for Ukraine to become part of Russia or for any territories of Ukraine to become part mm-hmm. of Russia. And in particular, the party they're talking about is this party of regions of Viktor Yanukovych. And the whole, what's the proper word, mess in 2013, 2014 started because Putin wanted Yanukovych to sign a deal for more trade between Ukraine and Russia, and Yanukovych wouldn't do it. Mm-hmm. So the parties that Elon Musk are calling pro-Russian refused to sign a trade deal with Russia. Mm-hmm. There have been in Ukraine's history, especially in eastern Ukraine and Crimea, parties that ran specifically on a let's reunify with Russia platform, or let's secede from Ukraine platform. They've never gotten more than 4% of the vote mm-hmm. anywhere, even in mm-hmm. eastern Ukraine, even in Crimea. Mm-hmm. These are basic facts that 25 minutes worth of research could have demonstrated to Mr. Musk. And instead, oddly enough, he's saying these things that happen to be
it seems like he's taking some surface level information, making some major claims about it, and he obviously has a huge following who's then parroting his claims. And you're a deep scholar of this region, obviously, for decades now. You've written a book on this and everything else. So let's say you had Elon Musk's platform. You're going to send out a tweet like this, similar to his, but with your kind of things for this war. What would you send out there, Paul, into the world? What would you say, like, for Ukraine-Russia peace, semicolon, this is what needs to happen? Right.
So this is why. So I don't know if you remember when we started this whole project together, one of the things we were going to call this was it's complicated.
Yeah. So right? You can't tweet it. Yeah.
Well, this is a really important point. If you think you can solve really tricky global problems in 140 characters, right, then you are part of the problem, not part of the solution. Right? Let's just stop and draw a line right there. These things are complicated, and they're complicated. And that desire for simplicity, it can be very, very dangerous. Now, let me try to give you the very short version. The maps are misleading. The label pro-Russian is misleading. The people in those regions have shown what they want, right? They fought to stay Ukrainian. They've died to stay Ukrainian. And I think you and I have already talked about this, and the people all over Ukraine are saying this, right? Is It's not that they're not afraid of Russian nuclear weapons. They're terrified of Russian nuclear weapons. But they're not going to give in because of them. Right? So if the Ukrainians, that's how pro-Russian they are. They're so pro-Russian that they're willing to run the risk of being nuked in order to avoid being part of Russia. That's what I would say to Elon Musk. Mm-hmm. Maybe that last part would be the 140 character part. I'm not good at the 140 characters.
You know what? You're exactly right. We've tried to dissect this war for 6 months now. Yep. There's always something new coming up. Nothing is as straightforward as it seems. There's games that multiple people are playing on different levels, and this is a very complex situation. And there's still likely so much to play out. And the reason I bring up Elon Musk is obviously he has this major voice on the world stage, be it for good or for bad. And obviously, and even the news recently came out that he might have actually spoken to Putin. So either he has Putin's ear to some degree or whatever, or he's taking information.
Or Putin has his ear.
Or Putin has his ear, or Putin or Elon Musk needs some resources in Ukraine and he needs the war to stop. Like who knows what the variables are? We don't know the variables. All what we're trying to get down to is, okay, what is needed to resolve the conflict to some degree? That's not easy.
So let me try to make a point that's going to make some of my Ukrainian friends really angry with me, which is, the Ukrainian position is we have to get back every square inch of territory, including Crimea and including territory that was occupied in, way back in 2014. Given recent developments on the battlefield, that seems more likely now than ever before. But there's still a very, very, very long way from that. And it seems possible for me to imagine that at some point it will be in Ukraine's interest to stop the war without having gotten all that territory back. Mm-hmm. But I would not give it away right now unless, from my perspective, what would Russia have to offer for me to want to give away all that territory? I can't imagine. Mm-hmm. Right? Why would you give them that territory? Because as of right now, Russia cannot hold it.
Like you said, a potential possibility. Elon Musk said that this is the likely outcome are these concessions, but another potential possibility is the Russian army collapses, there's a palace coup, and Putin is out of power. Yep. We don't know where it's going to go. So again,
if this Musk and people like him, right, were saying years ago, essentially, right, that the West should essentially let Russia take Ukraine, right? Not militarily, because it wouldn't need to do it militarily if the West backed it. Basically said, yeah, we should just acknowledge that Ukraine is going to be Russian. Mm-hmm. And is it ours to give away?
Mm-hmm. Is there similarities to is it Chamberlain, The Peace in Our Time?
Of course.
The appeasement of Adolf Hitler?
Of course, because there's been all of this talk, and back in 2014, people compared what Putin did to Hitler, and other people said, "Oh, come on, that's alarmist, that's irresponsible, that's so on." But sure enough, right, having gotten a little piece of Ukraine, he decided eventually he wanted the rest of it. And this is the other big question: is especially if these hardliners are rewarded, right? What are they going to want next? Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia were all part of the Soviet Union. Most of Poland was part of the Russian Empire. Much of Poland, I should say, was part of the Russian Empire, right? Alaska used to belong to Russia. Mm-hmm. And this is a really important point, Sarish, without being quite so inflammatory. It is really hard for us to know. Is there something that we could give Russia that would make them fat and happy and everybody could sit down again, right? And be friends. And I think there's always been this temptation that if we could find that thing, let's give it to them, right? Even if it's Ukraine. I think what a lot of people worry about is that there is no such thing, right? And that giving somebody a bunch of something that's not theirs really generally only feeds their appetite rather than satisfying it.
Mm-hmm. So. But are you getting into kind of some territory? This was the argument for Germany. They started 2 world wars, and then the eventual consensus was we need to defang Germany. Yeah. Otherwise, they're going to continue doing this. Is this what you're saying about Russia?
In the medium to long term, one of two things is going to have to happen. Either well, actually, I think it's only one thing. Yeah, I don't think we're going to occupy and defang Russia the way we occupied and defanged Germany and Japan at the end of World War II. Number one, it's just too big. And number two, I don't see Russia being defeated as comprehensively as the countries were defeated. The other thing, though, that happened in Germany after World War II was Germany changed its spots. Germany and the Japanese changed their spots. They basically said our power was so dangerous to our neighbors that we have to limit it. Right? There's other examples: the French Empire, the British Empire, right? The Turkish Empire. But it took really decades for those countries to really redefine themselves as countries rather than empires. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be very hard for Russia to do that, because if you take the Russia as it exists without Ukraine or any of this stuff, there are a lot of people who say even that's an empire, right? The Chechens always felt like they didn't belong to Russia. So this question of what is Russia, and if you have a Russia that's not an empire, what does it look like? That's a challenging question.
That sounds like a whole other podcast episode.
That's a long way from Elon Musk.
We will get into all the details of something like that, because it's a fascinating subject. As always, Paul, thank you so much for this discussion, and we will continue in the future again. Take care.
All right.